The photographer's voice had that apologetic lilt people use when delivering bad news they didn't create. Mother of the bride? He checked his clipboard twice, lips pressing into a thin line. I'm sorry, ma'am, but your name isn't on the immediate family list for these portraits. I stood there in my mother of the bride dress. The elegant champagne silk I'd chosen months ago had tailored twice to get perfect, and felt the floor tilt beneath my feet. The corsage pinned to my chest suddenly felt heavy, like a badge of participation in an event where I wasn't actually wanted. There must be some mistake, I said, though my voice already knew the truth. He shifted uncomfortably, already looking past me toward the family assembling under the floral arch. These arrangements were made by your daughter and her wedding coordinator. If you'd like to speak with— No. I held up my hand, stopping him. That's fine. I stepped back from the portrait area and found myself drifting toward the edge of the ballroom, watching my only child laugh with her new in-laws. Mila looked radiant in her lace gown, the train pooling behind her like spilled moonlight. Daniel's mother, wearing a designer suit that cost more than my mortgage, touched Mila's shoulder with the easy possession of someone who'd already claimed her. The ballroom buzzed with champagne toasts and the string quartet's soft melodies. Crystal chandeliers refracted light across hundreds of guests. White roses and hydrangeas cascaded from every surface. I'd seen the invoice for this wedding, $85,000. Mila had insisted on the Grand Riverside Hotel, the best florist in the city, a custom Vera Wang gown, a honeymoon in Santorini. And somehow, I wasn't worth including in the family photographs. The ceremony had been beautiful, I'll give her that. I'd watched from the fourth row, not the front, not even the second, as my daughter walked down the aisle on Daniel's father's arm. Daniel's father, a man she'd known less than 2 years, while I'd held her through every fever, every heartbreak, every nightmare since the day she was born. It's more traditional this way, Mom, she told me 3 weeks ago when I'd asked about walking together. Daniel's family has certain expectations, and we want to honor their customs. Their customs, not ours. Not the customs of the woman who raised her alone after her father died. During the reception speeches, Daniel's father stood and raised his champagne flute, his voice booming with the confidence of a man used to being heard. We're thrilled to welcome Mila into the Westbrook family. And of course, we look forward to supporting this young couple as they build their future together. He paused, turning his smile toward me, that calculated, knowing smile. We're hoping Nora will also contribute generously to their foundation. After all, family takes care of family. The room chuckled politely. Heads turned toward me. Mila didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't redirect her father-in-law's thinly veiled demand. In that moment, standing in my champagne silk dress with a wilting corsage, I realized something with absolute clarity. I wasn't excluded because they forgot about me. I was excluded because they'd already categorized me, assessed my value, determined my role. I was a checkbook. An asset to be managed, a widow who should be grateful for any attention at all. Before we continue with Nora's story, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? And if you're enjoying this story, please subscribe, like, and share. Your support means everything. None of this happened overnight. It started 7 years ago, so gradually I almost didn't notice. My husband Victor died when Mila was 19, a heart attack that took him in his sleep, sudden and merciless. One morning he was making coffee and planning our anniversary trip to the coast, and by evening I was signing papers at the hospital, trying to understand how the world could keep spinning when mine had just stopped. I'm Nora Castellano. I'm 58 years old. I spent 32 years as a high school English teacher, retiring 2 years ago to finally write that novel I'd always talked about. Not glamorous work, teaching, but meaningful work. I shaped young minds, encouraged reluctant readers, wrote college recommendation letters at midnight, and bought classroom supplies with my own money when the district budget ran dry. Victor and I bought our house in Maplewood back in 1989, a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial with a wraparound porch where we'd drink coffee on Sunday mornings. We paid it off in 18 years, sent Mila to a good private high school, then to university. We'd been careful with money, careful with choices, careful to raise our daughter with values that mattered. Kindness over status, character over wealth, people over possessions. Victor came from old money, though you'd never know it by looking at us. His family's fortune had been built 3 generations back: textile mills, property investments, shipping contracts. The inheritance skipped his father's generation due to some family dispute I never fully understood, and landed with Victor when he turned 38. He quietly grew that inheritance into a $10 million portfolio, but we lived modestly. We didn't want wealth to poison Mila's character or make her believe she was better than anyone else. Money is a responsibility, not a trophy, Victor used to say. It can build or destroy, depending on the heart that holds it. When he died, he'd left explicit instructions. Mila would inherit everything, but only when she proved she understood its weight, only when she showed she valued people more than possessions, only when she demonstrated the character her father believed she could develop. "Protect the fortune, Nora," he'd whispered in the hospital the night before he died, his hand trembling in mine. "Don't let it destroy her. She has to earn it. She has to become the woman we raised her to be first." I'd promised him. At the time, through my tears and disbelief, I thought he was being overly cautious. Our daughter was grieving, yes, but she was good. She was kind. She volunteered at animal shelters and called me Mommy, even at 16. But Victor had seen something I hadn't, or maybe he'd simply understood what money could do to people, even good people, if they weren't ready. Those first months after his death, Mila clung to me. She had panic attacks, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on her college applications. I held her through every breakdown, drove her to therapy twice a week, helped her defer university enrollment by a semester so she could heal. We grieved together, or at least I thought we did. But about 18 months after Victor's funeral, things shifted. Small things at first, barely noticeable. Phone calls that used to come daily became weekly, then sporadic. Sunday dinners got canceled. "Sorry, Mom, something came up with friends." Birthday cards arrived late or not at all. Text messages went unanswered for days. When I asked if everything was okay, Mila would smile that new smile, the one that didn't reach her eyes, and say, "Mom, you're overthinking. I'm just busy with school. You know how it is." But I did know. I'd been a teacher for 3 decades. I knew the difference between busy and distant, between overwhelmed and deliberately absent. She started dating men who made my stomach turn, not because they were unkind, they were perfectly polite, but because she chose them for what they could offer: connections, status, expensive dinners, weekend trips to ski resorts. The girl who once dated the shy boy from her debate team because "he makes me laugh, Mom," was gone. By the time Mila graduated from university, our relationship had become transactional. She called when she needed something: a reference for a job, money for a business opportunity, emotional support after a breakup, but only if the breakup threatened her social standing. That first Thanksgiving after Victor died, when Mila texted at 10 a.m. to say she'd decided to spend the holiday with her boyfriend's family in Aspen instead, I sat alone at the dining room table with a store-bought turkey and realized something painful. My daughter was disappearing, and I didn't know how to stop it. Then, 2 years ago, she met Daniel. The first time Daniel Westbrook walked into my home, he surveyed the living room, the room Victor and I had decorated together, filled with books and family photos and furniture we'd chosen with care. And his first words were, "Your home is quaint." Quaint, as if the house we'd built our life in was somehow beneath him. He was tall, polished, expensively dressed, with the kind of confidence that comes from never having been told no. During dinner, he asked questions that felt less like conversation and more like an audit. "Nora, did Victor have any investment properties? Any trusts set up for Mila? What about retirement accounts? Life insurance policies?" Mila sat beside him, cutting her chicken into small pieces, saying nothing, not redirecting, not defending, not even looking uncomfortable. After they left, I stood in my kitchen washing dishes and felt a cold dread settle in my chest. Every subsequent visit confirmed my suspicions. Daniel would make comments, casual, almost friendly, about older people sometimes letting their assets sit idle, or the importance of estate planning, or how generous parents often help their children get established. The subtext was always the same: where's the money, and when can we have it? 6 months into their relationship, I caught Daniel scanning documents on my desk while Mila distracted me in the kitchen with wedding talk. He didn't even look embarrassed when I walked in. "Just admiring your organization system," he said smoothly, setting down a folder that contained Victor's old financial statements. That night, I called the lawyer Victor had trusted most, a quiet, meticulous man named Harold Brennan, who'd helped structure Victor's estate. I explained what was happening, the pressure I was feeling, the sense that my daughter's fiancé saw me as an obstacle rather than a person. "Mrs. Castellano," Harold said gently, "your husband anticipated this possibility. That's why he gave you full discretion over the inheritance. You have the legal authority to move those assets anywhere you see fit." Within a week, I'd transferred the entire $10 million trust into a sealed, protected account under my name alone. The money could only be released if I personally approved it, or if Mila met certain conditions Victor had outlined before his death. Conditions she knew nothing about. Conditions that measured character, not time. Empathy, not ambition. Love, not leverage. Mila had no idea the inheritance even existed. As far as she knew, Victor had left me comfortable, but not wealthy. A teacher's retirement, a paid-off house, maybe some savings. She had no idea that her father had left her a fortune, and that by the time she walked down that aisle in her Vera Wang gown, I'd already hidden almost all of it. Sitting at the edge of the ballroom, watching my daughter dance with her new husband while his parents beamed like they'd acquired a prized asset, I thought about Victor's final words. "Protect the fortune, Nora. Whether she deserves it or not will become clear." It had become very clear. The real test would come later, 3 months after the wedding, when Mila and Daniel would show up at my door with rehearsed smiles and carefully worded questions about family assets and financial planning and what Daddy must have left behind. They had no idea the money they'd built their future around was already gone. And if they'd known the truth, that the $10 million sat untouched, protected, waiting for a version of my daughter who might never exist, I wonder if they would have invited me to the wedding at all, or if they would have simply cut me out entirely. But to understand how we got here, to a wedding where I was invisible and an inheritance that was hidden, I need to take you back 7 years, back to the night Victor died and changed everything. It was a Tuesday in September. An ordinary Tuesday, the kind where nothing significant is supposed to happen. Victor had spent the day in his study, working on what he called his legacy planning, though at the time I didn't fully understand what that meant. We'd had dinner together, salmon and roasted vegetables, nothing special, and watched an episode of the British mystery show we'd been following for months. "I love you, Nora," he said before we went to bed, kissing my forehead the way he'd done for 41 years. "No matter what happens, remember that everything I've done has been for you and Mila, to protect you both." I'd smiled, squeezed his hand, thought nothing of it except that my husband was sentimental sometimes. Sweet, but sentimental. At 3:47 a.m., I woke to silence. The wrong kind of silence. Victor wasn't breathing. The paramedics came, the emergency room doctors tried. But a massive heart attack doesn't negotiate, doesn't give second chances, doesn't care that you're only 63 and had plans for retirement and grandchildren and growing old together. By dawn, I was a widow. Mila arrived at the hospital 2 hours after he died, her face pale and swollen from crying. She'd driven straight from university, still in her pajamas under her coat. When she saw me sitting in that sterile waiting room, she collapsed into my arms. "Daddy," she sobbed. Just that one word, over and over. "Daddy." We held each other and broke apart together. Those first weeks were a blur of funeral arrangements, sympathy casseroles, and paperwork that never seemed to end. Mila moved back home temporarily. sleeping in her childhood bedroom, and for a brief moment, it felt like we'd always be this close. Two women united by grief, supporting each other through the unimaginable. She had panic attacks, terrible gasping episodes where she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't function. I'd sit with her on the bathroom floor at 2 a.m., rubbing her back, reminding her to breathe. In, out, in, out. You're safe. I'm here. We'll get through this. I took her to therapy twice a week, made her favorite meals even when neither of us had an appetite, let her cry without trying to fix it because some things can't be fixed, only survived. During those months, I thought grief would bind us together permanently, that we'd emerge from this tragedy closer than ever. I didn't know yet that grief can also reveal people. Strip away the performance and show you who they really are underneath. 3 weeks after the funeral, Victor's attorney, Harold Brennan, a meticulous man in his early 70s who'd known Victor since college, called and asked me to come to his office, alone. "Mrs. Castellano," he said, gesturing to the leather chair across from his desk, "your husband left very specific instructions regarding his estate. Instructions that are unconventional." I sat down, still numb, still half believing Victor would walk through the door and tell me this was all some terrible mistake. Harold opened a thick manila folder. Victor came from a family with substantial wealth: textile manufacturing, property investments, shipping interests dating back to the 1890s. Due to a family dispute, the inheritance skipped his father's generation and came directly to Victor when he turned 38. I knew this vaguely. Victor had mentioned family money, but never dwelled on it. We'd lived modestly by choice, not necessity. The inheritance was approximately $4 million at the time, Harold continued. Victor invested carefully over the past 25 years and grew it into a portfolio worth just over $10 million. The number hung in the air between us. $10 million, an amount so large it didn't feel real. Victor created a trust, Harold said carefully, but not a traditional one. The money doesn't automatically pass to Mila when she turns a certain age or reaches certain milestones. Instead, he's given you, and only you, complete discretionary control. "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice sounding far away. "It means you decide when, how, and if Mila receives any of this inheritance." Victor outlined certain conditions he hoped she would meet: demonstrations of character, empathy, financial responsibility, and genuine concern for others over personal gain. But ultimately, the decision is yours. He slid a document across the desk, Victor's letter to me, written in his careful handwriting. I read it there in Harold's office, tears blurring the words. "My dearest Nora, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm so sorry to leave you alone, but I need you to understand why I've structured things this way. Money can poison hearts if they're not ready for it. I've seen it happen in my own family. Siblings who stopped speaking, cousins who sued each other, good people who became strangers when inheritance arrived. I love our daughter more than anything, but I see something in her that worries me, a small seed of entitlement, a tendency to measure her worth by external validation. It's subtle now, but money will water that seed if she's not careful. The trust is your responsibility, Nora. Not because I don't trust Mila, but because I trust you to know when she's ready, if she's ready. Protect the fortune. Protect her from it until she proves she values people more than possessions. Until she understands that wealth is a responsibility, not a trophy. And protect yourself, my love. Don't let anyone, not even our daughter, manipulate you into releasing funds before the time is right. I believe Mila can grow into the woman we raised her to be, but she has to choose it. She has to earn it. I love you both, always. And Victor. I sat in that office and cried until I had nothing left. Harold gave me time, then explained the mechanics. The money was secured in a trust only I could access. Mila wasn't mentioned in Victor's public will, only the house, some personal items, and a small savings account that covered immediate expenses. Victor was very clear, Harold said gently. The inheritance remains hidden until you determine she's ready. And if that day never comes, You have the authority to redirect the funds however you see fit. Charity, other family, anything. It's entirely your decision." I drove home in a daze. $10 million, a secret fortune, a test my daughter didn't know she was taking. That night, I sat with Mila in the living room. She was curled up on the couch with Victor's favorite blanket, her eyes red from crying. "The lawyer called me in today," I said carefully, "to go over Daddy's will." She looked up, vulnerable and young. "What did he leave us?" "The house is paid off. There's about $50,000 in savings, some personal items." All true, just not the complete truth. "That's it?" She seemed surprised, but not upset. "I thought Daddy had more." "He provided for us," I said. "We'll be okay." She nodded, accepting it, and went back to scrolling through photos of Victor on her phone. I didn't tell her about the $10 million that night, or any night after, because in that moment I realized Victor had been right to worry. Mila's first question hadn't been, "How are you, Mom?" or "How will we manage?" It had been, "What did he leave us?" Us, as if his death was a transaction, an inheritance event, as if the man who'd raised her, loved her, sacrificed for her, was reducible to what he'd left behind. That small moment, so easy to dismiss, so easy to excuse as grief, was the first crack in the foundation. The first sign that Victor had seen something I'd been too close to notice. Over the following months, Mila returned to university. The panic attacks decreased. The therapy sessions ended. She started going out with friends again, dating again, rebuilding her life. And slowly, she started pulling away from me. At first, I told myself it was healthy. She was young, processing grief in her own way, establishing independence. But deep down, I knew the truth. The daughter who used to call me every day stopped calling. The girl who'd once said, "I love you, Mommy," before hanging up stopped saying it. The young woman who'd sobbed in my arms and promised we'd always be close started treating our relationship like an obligation. Victor had left me a fortune to protect. But what I didn't realize, what I couldn't have known, was that I'd be protecting it from the one person it was meant to help, the one person who was slowly becoming someone I didn't recognize, my own daughter. The first year after Victor died, Mila called me every single day. The second year, the calls became weekly. By the third year, she only called when she needed something. I didn't notice it happening, not at first. Grief has a way of distorting time, blurring the edges of what's normal and what's not. I told myself she was healing, moving forward, building the independent life Victor and I had always wanted for her. But independence and abandonment aren't the same thing, even if they sometimes look identical from a distance. It started with small things. Missed Sunday dinners with vague excuses, texted an hour after she was supposed to arrive. "Sorry, Mom, got caught up with a study group." Or, "Something came up with friends, rain check?" The rain checks never materialized. My birthday came and went her junior year of college. No card, no call, no acknowledgement until 3 days later when she texted, "OMG, Mom, I'm so sorry. School has been insane. Love you, love you." 2 words that used to mean something, now reduced to punctuation at the end of a guilt-softening message. I'd call her, excited to hear her voice, and get voicemail. Hours would pass, sometimes days. When she finally called back, the conversation felt transactional, like she was checking a box on her to-do list. "Hi, Mom, sorry, what's up? I only have a few minutes before class. I just wanted to hear your voice, sweetheart, see how you're doing." "I'm good. Super busy, but good. Look, I really need to run." And she'd be gone before I could tell her about the book I was reading, or the garden I was planting, or the way I'd rearranged the living room, and it made me think of her because she'd always loved that corner by the window. The girl who used to talk to me for hours about everything and nothing, couldn't spare 10 minutes. By her senior year, something else changed, something harder to name but impossible to ignore. She started dating different types of men. In high school, Mila had dated sweet boys, the kid from her debate team who made her laugh, the musician who wrote her terrible love songs, the shy artist who drew her portrait for her birthday. They weren't impressive by conventional standards, but they were kind. They treated her well. They saw her for who she was, not what she could offer. But after Victor died, her taste shifted. She dated a finance major who drove a BMW his parents bought him and talked constantly about his future salary. An entrepreneur who was building a startup that never seemed to actually do anything except host networking events. A semi-professional lacrosse player who measured every interaction by social media engagement. When I met them, the few times Mila actually brought them around, they were polite but empty. Handshakes without warmth, compliments without sincerity, questions about my life that felt like they were checking boxes rather than building connection. "Mom." "You'd love Brandon," Mila gushed once over the phone. "He just got accepted to Wharton's MBA program. His family owns 3 restaurants in the city. He's so driven. Not he's kind, not he makes me laugh, not I feel safe with him. Driven, connected, successful." I tried to talk to her about it once, gently. "Sweetheart, do you really like these men you're dating? Or do you like what they represent?" Her response was immediate and sharp. "Mom, you're being judgmental. Just because someone is successful doesn't mean they're shallow." "I didn't say they were shallow. I just want to make sure you're choosing people who value you for the right reasons. You're overthinking this. Honestly, you're too emotional about everything lately. Have you thought about talking to someone? Like, therapy might help." The reversal was so swift, so calculated, that it took my breath away. Suddenly, I was the problem. I was too emotional. I needed therapy, gaslighting wrapped in concern. I let it go that time, and the next time, and the time after that. Because what was I supposed to say? That I was watching my daughter transform into someone I didn't recognize? That the values Victor and I had spent 19 years instilling seemed to be evaporating? That I was terrified she was measuring her worth by bank accounts and social status instead of character and kindness? She wouldn't have heard me anyway. The breaking point came during her final semester of college. Mila called, for once without prompting, and asked if she could come over to discuss something important. I was thrilled. Maybe she wanted advice about job applications, or needed help processing grief that she'd been bottling up, or simply missed her mother. She arrived on a Saturday afternoon, dressed in clothes I didn't recognize, expensive brands I'd seen in magazines but never imagined buying. Her hair was professionally styled. Her nails were perfect. "You look beautiful," I said, hugging her at the door. "Thanks, Mom." She pulled away quickly, glancing around the house like she was cataloging it. "Can we sit down? I want to talk to you about an opportunity." An opportunity. Not, "I missed you," or "I wanted to spend time with you." An opportunity. We sat at the kitchen table where we'd shared thousands of meals, and Mila pulled out her phone, scrolling to a bookmarked article. "So, a few of my friends are investing in this incredible startup, a wellness app that's going to revolutionize how people approach mental health. The founders are Harvard grads, and they're about to close a Series A funding round. This is a ground floor opportunity, Mom. Like, potentially life-changing returns." I listened, confused about why she was telling me this. "The minimum investment is $35,000, she continued, her voice taking on a rehearsed quality. "I know that sounds like a lot, but this is an investment in my future. If I get in now, I'll have equity. When the company goes public, that $35,000 could become hundreds of thousands, maybe more." The kitchen suddenly felt very cold. "You're asking me for $35,000? It's an investment, Mom, not just giving me money. This is smart financial planning. Daddy would understand. He was always talking about strategic investments." The invocation of Victor's name, using him to justify this, made something twist in my chest. "Mila, I don't have $35,000 to invest in a startup." Her expression hardened. "Mom, I know Daddy left you money. You have savings. The house is paid off. You're retired. What are you even spending money on?" "That's not the point. Then what is the point? That you don't believe in me? That you don't want to support my future? I've supported your future your entire life. I supported you through college, through grief, through everything. But I'm not giving you $35,000 for a risky investment that you don't need." "Don't need?" Her voice rose. "This is about building wealth, Mom. Creating opportunities. Or would you rather I just struggle forever because you're too scared to take chances?" "This isn't about taking chances. This is about you asking for an enormous amount of money without considering what that means or what you're really asking." She stood up abruptly, grabbing her purse. "I should have known you wouldn't understand. You've always been so risk-averse, so stuck in your little safe world. Daddy was the visionary. You're just scared." She left without saying goodbye. That night, I sat in the dark living room, the same room where she'd once built blanket forts and read books curled up beside me, and realized the girl I'd raised was gone, the daughter who used to volunteer at animal shelters every Saturday, who cried when she saw homeless people and insisted we buy them meals, who wrote thank you notes to her teachers and donated her birthday money to charity. That girl had disappeared. In her place was someone who measured relationships by ROI, who saw her own mother as a potential investor rather than a person, who weaponized her father's memory to manipulate me. I thought about the $10 million sitting in that trust, protected and hidden. I thought about Victor's letter. Money can poison hearts if they're not ready. And I understood finally why he'd been so afraid. The poison was already spreading. Mila just didn't have access to the fortune yet. I couldn't imagine what would happen if she did. After that conversation, weeks passed without contact, then a month, then 2. When she finally called again, it was to tell me she'd gotten a job at a prestigious marketing firm and would be too busy to visit for a while. "I'm proud of you," I said, meaning it despite everything. "Thanks," she replied, distracted. "Listen, I have to go. Meeting in 5. I'll call you soon." She didn't call soon. She barely called at all. And somewhere in that silence, I accepted the painful truth. My daughter was choosing ambition over connection, status over love, transaction over relationship. Victor had hoped she would grow into the woman we'd raised her to be. Instead, she was becoming someone we wouldn't recognize, and the fortune that was supposed to secure her future, it was securing nothing but distance between us. Mila met Daniel Westbrook at a networking event for young professionals in Atlanta. She called me the next day, the first unprompted call I'd received in months, breathless with excitement. "Mom, I met someone. He's incredible. He works as a financial advisor at Westbrook & Associates. That's his family's firm. They manage portfolios for some of the wealthiest families in Georgia. He's so smart, so ambitious. I think this could be something real." I wanted to be happy for her. I wanted to hear the joy in her voice and simply celebrate with her. But something in the way she described him, leading with his job, his family's firm, their wealthy clients, made my stomach tighten. "What's he like as a person?" I asked carefully. "What do you mean? I just told you. I mean, does he make you laugh? Is he kind? Does he treat you well?" There was a pause. "Mom, he's all of those things, obviously. But he's also successful and driven and has an amazing future ahead of him. I'm 25 years old. I'm allowed to care about compatibility on multiple levels." "Of course you are, sweetheart. I just want to make sure you're happy." "I am happy," she said, but there was an edge to her voice. "You'll meet him soon. You'll see." I met Daniel 3 weeks later when Mila brought him to the house for Sunday dinner. He arrived in a black Mercedes, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly retirement income. Tall, polished, conventionally handsome with the kind of confidence that borders on arrogance. He shook my hand firmly, too firmly, like he was establishing dominance, and smiled with perfectly whitened teeth. "Mrs. Castellano, so wonderful to finally meet you. Mila's told me so much about you. Please, call me Nora. Come in, come in." He stepped into the foyer, and I watched his eyes sweep across the living room. The furniture Victor and I had chosen together, the built-in bookshelves filled with novels and photo albums, the Persian rug we'd bought at an estate sale 20 years ago, the piano Mila had learned to play as a child. His expression shifted, subtle but unmistakable. Assessment, calculation, disappointment. "Your place is quaint," he said finally, the word landing like a judgment. Quaint, as if the home where I'd raised my daughter, where Victor and I had built 41 years of memories, where every object held stories and love and intention, as if all of that was somehow small, insufficient, beneath consideration. Mila looked embarrassed, her cheeks flushing, but she said nothing, didn't correct him, didn't defend the home she'd grown up in. "Thank you," I said evenly, refusing to let him see how the word had stung. "I've always loved this house. It has good bones." Daniel smiled, that practiced, professional smile. "Oh, absolutely. These older homes have character, though the upkeep must be exhausting. Have you thought about downsizing? A lot of people your age find smaller spaces more manageable." People my age. I was 51 at the time, hardly ancient. "I managed just fine," I said. Dinner was worse. Daniel dominated the conversation, talking about market trends and investment strategies and clients he couldn't name, but whose wealth he could certainly imply. He asked questions that felt less like genuine interest and more like an audit. "So Nora, Mila mentioned you retired early. That must have required some serious financial planning." "I was careful with my savings," I said carefully. "And Victor, Mila's father, he worked in what industry?" "He had various business investments, private ventures mostly." "Interesting." Daniel leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Did he leave any active investments? Property portfolios? Trust structures?" Mila touched his arm. "Daniel, we don't need to talk about this." "I'm just curious," he said smoothly. "Financial planning is my specialty, and I'd be happy to offer Nora any guidance. A lot of widows don't realize they're sitting on underutilized assets. Money that could be working harder for them." The presumption was staggering. The idea that I, a woman who'd managed a household budget for decades, who'd sent a daughter to college, who'd helped Victor make investment decisions throughout our marriage, somehow needed this 32-year-old man to explain finances to me. "I appreciate the offer," I said, "but I have excellent advisors." His smile tightened. "Of course. I just meant, if you ever want a second opinion." The rest of the evening continued in that vein. Daniel asking probing questions disguised as concern, Mila growing quieter, more withdrawn, me deflecting with practiced politeness. After they left, I stood at the kitchen sink washing dishes and felt a cold dread settle over me. Daniel Westbrook hadn't come to meet his girlfriend's mother. He'd come to assess an asset. The visits continued over the following months. Every few weeks, Mila would bring Daniel by, and each time the pattern repeated. He'd walk through the house, commenting on things that needed updating. "This kitchen is pretty dated, Nora. Have you thought about renovation? Could really increase the home value." He'd ask about insurance policies. "You do have good life insurance, right? At your age, it's critical." He'd make casual observations about waste. "Big house for one person, lot of unused space, lot of money going into heating and cooling rooms you probably never enter." Every comment was wrapped in concern, but the subtext was always the same. You have resources you're not using efficiently, resources that could benefit Mila, resources that should benefit us. And Mila? She never defended me, never told him to stop, never redirected the conversation. She'd simply sit there, looking mildly uncomfortable, as if she wanted to object, but lacked the courage or conviction to actually do it. The turning point came on a Saturday afternoon about 6 months into their relationship. They'd stopped by unannounced. Daniel's suggestion, Mila said apologetically. She needed to pick up some old textbooks from her bedroom. I invited them in, offered coffee, and excused myself to take a phone call from my sister. I was in the kitchen, talking to Margaret about holiday plans, when I walked back into the living room and froze. Daniel was standing at Victor's old desk in the corner. The desk I'd left largely untouched since he died, still holding his papers and files and personal effects. Daniel had his phone out, photographing documents. "What are you doing?" The words came out sharper than I intended. He looked up, startled, but not embarrassed. "Oh, sorry, Nora. I was just admiring your organization system. Very impressive." "I noticed some investment statements here. These funds have decent returns. But if you transferred them to a growth-focused portfolio, you could probably double your yield." He'd been photographing my financial documents, looking through Victor's private papers, assessing, calculating, cataloging. "Those documents are private," I said quietly. Of course. He set his phone down, hands raised in mock surrender. "I wasn't trying to pry, just offering professional insight. It's habit, you know. I see numbers and my brain automatically starts optimizing." Mila appeared from upstairs, her arms full of books. "Ready to go?" "Absolutely." Daniel smiled at me, that professional, meaningless smile. "Thanks for the coffee, Nora. Always great to see you." They left. I stood in the living room, staring at Victor's desk, and felt something shift inside me. This wasn't casual interest. This wasn't a son-in-law trying to help his girlfriend's widowed mother. This was reconnaissance. Daniel was mapping my assets, calculating my worth, planning for a future where he'd have access to whatever Victor had left behind. And Mila, whether consciously or not, was letting him. That night, I called Harold Brennan. "I need to move the trust," I said, without preamble. "All of it. I need it completely protected, completely inaccessible, completely hidden." "Mrs. Castellano, the trust is already quite secure." "It's not secure enough. I need every single asset moved into a sealed trust that only I can access. I need documentation that proves Mila has no claim to any of it unless I explicitly authorize the transfer. I need it done immediately." There was a long pause. "May I ask what prompted this?" I told him about Daniel, the probing questions, the photographed documents, the constant financial auditing disguised as concern. "I see," Harold said quietly. Victor was wise to plan for this possibility. Within 2 weeks, the entire $10 million portfolio was moved into a new, impenetrable trust structure. Only my signature could authorize any transfer. Only my approval could grant access. Mila would inherit nothing unless I decided she was ready. And based on the man she was planning to marry, that day was growing more distant with every passing month. Victor had warned me, money can poison hearts if they're not ready. But what he hadn't prepared me for was watching my daughter choose someone who was already poisoned by greed. Someone who saw me not as a person, but as a bank account with a pulse. Someone who was slowly, methodically, turning my daughter into a stranger. The engagement announcement came via text message, not a phone call, not an in-person visit. A text sent to a family group chat that included me and some cousins I barely spoke to. "Daniel proposed. I said yes. Wedding planning starts now." Attached was a photo of Mila's hand, a diamond ring catching the light, Daniel's arm around her shoulders in the background. I stared at my phone, sitting alone in my kitchen, and tried to feel happy. I called immediately. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "Sweetheart, congratulations. I'm so happy for you. Call me when you get a chance. I'd love to hear all about it. Love you." She texted back 3 hours later. "Thanks, Mom. Super busy with celebration dinner at Daniel's parents' place. Talk soon." I wasn't invited to the celebration dinner. That should have been the first sign. But I told myself it was just the immediacy of the moment, the excitement, the spontaneity. Surely there would be time later for us to celebrate together, mother and daughter, the way we used to celebrate everything. There wasn't. 2 weeks after the engagement, Mila called and asked if we could meet for coffee. I arrived early, nervous and excited, ready to hear about her plans and offer whatever support she needed. She arrived with a leather-bound wedding planning binder and her laptop. "Okay, so I've been looking at venues," she said, before even ordering, pulling up a website. "The Grand Riverside Hotel has an opening next October. It's perfect. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, capacity for 300 guests. The package starts at $85,000, but that includes everything except the dress." $85,000. I must have looked shocked because she immediately got defensive. "I know it sounds like a lot, Mom, but this is my wedding. It's supposed to be special. Daniel's parents are contributing $30,000, and Daniel and I have been saving. We'll make it work." That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'm happy to contribute whatever I can." "We're not asking you for money," she said quickly. Too quickly. We have it handled. I just wanted to keep you informed. Not invited to contribute, just informed. Well, I'd love to help in other ways, I said, trying to keep my voice light. Planning, organizing, whatever you need. Your father and I always dreamed about your wedding day. Actually, Daniel's mom has offered to help coordinate everything. She's done this before. She planned Daniel's sister's wedding, and it was featured in Atlanta Bride magazine. She knows all the best vendors, has connections everywhere. It just makes sense to let her take the lead. Patricia Westbrook, Daniel's mother, a woman I'd met exactly twice, both times briefly, both times leaving me with the distinct impression that she'd assessed me and found me wanting. Of course, I said slowly, but I'd still like to be involved. This is my daughter's wedding. Mila smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You'll be involved, Mom. Obviously. Patricia has a system, and it's easier if we don't have too many people making decisions. You understand. I didn't understand. But I nodded anyway. Over the following months, I watched my daughter's wedding being planned without me. Patricia Westbrook took control of everything. The venue selection, decided at a meeting I wasn't invited to. The color scheme, chosen during a consultation I didn't know about. The florist, the caterer, the photographer, all contracted through Patricia's exclusive network of vendors who worked with her kind of clientele. When I asked about helping with the invitations, Mila told me Patricia had already commissioned custom designs from a calligrapher in Charleston. When I offered to host a small engagement party, Mila said Patricia was planning an elaborate event at their country club. When I suggested we go dress shopping together, just the two of us, the way I'd always imagined, Mila hesitated. Patricia already made appointments at a few boutiques. She knows the owners personally, so we'll get VIP treatment. You can come if you want. The "if you want" hung in the air like an afterthought. I went to the first dress appointment. Patricia was already there when I arrived, champagne poured, assistants hovering. She greeted me with air kisses and a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "Nora, so glad you could make it. We're just getting started." Mila emerged from the dressing room in the first gown, a stunning mermaid silhouette with intricate beading. "What do you think?" she asked, but she was looking at Patricia, not me. "Absolutely divine," Patricia declared. "Very sophisticated, very elegant, perfect for the riverside." "Mom?" Mila glanced at me almost as an afterthought. "You look beautiful." "Sweetheart." "Just beautiful," Patricia laughed lightly. "Darling, you look like a Westbrook bride, refined, classic, expensive." Expensive? As if that was the highest compliment. They tried 6 more dresses. Patricia offered opinions on each one. Too trendy, too simple, not flattering enough. I sat on the velvet couch with my untouched champagne, realizing my presence was purely ceremonial. I wasn't there to help my daughter choose her wedding dress. I was there to witness Patricia choosing it for her. The bridal shower invitation arrived in the mail 6 weeks before the wedding. Hosted by Patricia Westbrook and her sister Caroline at the Riverside Country Club. 40 guests, afternoon tea service, dress code, garden party, elegant. I called Mila immediately. "Sweetheart, I would have loved to help host your bridal shower." "Oh." Patricia just offered, and it seemed easier to let her handle it. You know how she is. She loves planning these things. "But I'm your mother." "I know, Mom, and you'll be there. That's what matters, right?" I attended the bridal shower in a dress I bought specifically for the occasion, feeling like an outsider at my own daughter's celebration. Patricia held court, telling stories about Daniel's childhood, making jokes about their family traditions, treating Mila like she'd already been absorbed into the Westbrook dynasty. When someone asked me to share a memory about Mila as a child, Patricia smoothly redirected. "Oh, we'll save the sentimental stories for the rehearsal dinner. Right now, let's play the gift game." I wasn't asked to speak at the rehearsal dinner either. The week before the wedding, I stopped by Mila's apartment to drop off a box of old photos I'd found, pictures of her and Victor, memories I thought she might want to display at the reception. The door was ajar, and I heard voices inside, Mila and one of her bridesmaids. "Just worried about the seating chart," the bridesmaid was saying. "Where are you putting your mom?" I froze in the hallway, my hand on the doorknob. Mila sighed. Table 12, near the back. Daniel's family is taking up the first 4 tables, and we need the front sections for his work colleagues and our friends. But she's your mom. Shouldn't she be at the family table? There was a long pause. Look, I love my mom, but she's not really classy enough for this crowd, you know? She's a retired high school teacher from a regular neighborhood. Daniel's family is used to a certain level of sophistication. Patricia specifically asked me to be thoughtful about the front-of-house optics. Front-of-house optics. I stood in that hallway, the box of photos still in my arms, and felt something break inside me. My daughter, the girl I'd carried, birthed, raised, loved through every difficult moment, had just reduced me to an embarrassment, a liability, someone who wasn't classy enough. I set the box down quietly outside her door and left. That night, I sat in Victor's study, surrounded by his books and his memory, and finally understood what he'd been trying to protect Mila from. Not the money itself, but what the desire for money, status, and belonging to the right crowd could do to a person's soul. My daughter wasn't marrying Daniel because she loved him. She was marrying into the Westbrook family because she wanted to become someone different, someone refined, someone expensive, someone who could relegate her own mother to table 12 because she wasn't sophisticated enough. The wedding was in 5 days. The $10 million inheritance sat in its sealed trust, untouched and hidden. And I realized, sitting there in the dark, that even if Mila never learned about the money, she'd already lost something far more valuable. She'd lost herself. And somewhere along the way, through canceled dinners and forgotten birthdays and "you're too emotional" deflections, she'd lost me too. I wasn't her mother anymore. I was just another person in her old life, standing in the way of her new one. The invitations had gone out months ago, beautiful cream cardstock with gold lettering, announcing the marriage of Mila Castellano and Daniel Westbrook. My name appeared once, in small print at the bottom. Daughter of the late Victor Castellano and Nora Castellano. An afterthought in the story of my own child's life. I would attend the wedding, I decided. I would wear my champagne silk dress and my wilting corsage. I would sit at table 12. And I would protect the fortune Victor left behind, just as he'd asked me to. Because the daughter who deserved it, the one who valued people over optics, love over status, character over class, no longer existed, and I was finally ready to accept that she might never come back. They came on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 months after the wedding. I was in the garden, pulling weeds from the rose bed Victor had planted 15 years ago, when I heard the car pull into the driveway. The black Mercedes. I hadn't spoken to Mila since a brief, stilted phone call 2 weeks after the honeymoon. "We were hoping to stop by," Mila called from the driveway, her voice unnaturally bright. "Do you have a few minutes?" They were already walking toward the front door before I could answer. I brushed the dirt from my hands and followed them inside, something tight and uncomfortable coiling in my stomach. This wasn't a casual visit. Mila had called ahead for those, back when she used to make them. This was something else. They sat on the living room couch, the same couch where Mila had once built blanket forts and read books curled against my side. Daniel's posture was businesslike, professional. Mila sat with her hands clasped in her lap, fingers twisting together. "Can I get you something to drink?" I asked. "Coffee? Water?" "We're fine, Mom." Mila smiled, but it was tight, rehearsed. "We actually wanted to talk to you about something important." I sat in the armchair across from them, waiting. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands steepled together like he was in a client meeting. "Nora, Mila, and I have been working with a financial planner, really top-tier guy, works with high-net-worth families. He's been helping us map out our 5-year plan, 10-year plan, long-term wealth-building strategy." "That sounds smart," I said carefully. "It is, very smart." He nodded, warming to his subject. But one thing he emphasized is the importance of understanding all family assets, complete financial transparency. You can't plan effectively if you're operating with incomplete information. The coil in my stomach tightened. Mila jumped in. Her voice softer, but no less pointed. "What Daniel means is, we realized we don't actually know what Daddy left behind. We never really talked about it after he died. You said there was savings and the house, but that was 7 years ago. We're just trying to get a clear picture now." "A clear picture of what?" I asked, though I already knew. Daniel exchanged a glance with Mila, some silent communication passing between them. She nodded slightly, and he continued. "Your assets, Nora, insurance policies, retirement accounts, investment portfolios, property holdings, anything Victor left that might be part of the estate. Our financial advisor said most people significantly underestimate what they actually have, and a lot of times money just sits there, not working efficiently. He also said," Mila added quickly, "that it's totally normal for adult children to understand their parents' financial situations, for planning purposes, for the future. For the future, meaning for when I die." "What specifically do you want to know?" I kept my voice even, calm. Mila's rehearsed composure cracked slightly. "Mama, Daddy must have left something significant. He was always so careful with money, always talking about investments and planning. There had to be life insurance, retirement accounts, something beyond just savings." "Your father provided for us," I said. "He made sure I'd be comfortable." "But how comfortable?" Daniel pressed. "Are we talking 50,000, 100,000, more? We're not trying to be invasive, Nora. We're trying to be responsible. Mila is your only child. Eventually, whatever assets you have will pass to her. We just need to understand the scope so we can plan accordingly." The presumption was staggering. The entitlement, breathtaking. "You're asking me to inventory my finances so you can factor them into your wealth-building strategy?" "That's not," Mila started, but Daniel cut her off. "With respect, Nora, yes, that's exactly what we're asking. And honestly, it's what any responsible family does. You're alone in this big house. You don't need much to live on. A widow in her late 50s doesn't have the same financial needs as a young couple building a life together. We're not asking you to hand over anything right now. We just need clarity. You're alone. You don't need much." The words landed like slaps. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, saw the guilt flickering behind her eyes, the discomfort in how she wouldn't quite meet my gaze, but she wasn't objecting, wasn't telling her husband his tone was inappropriate, his assumptions offensive. She was sitting there, silent, complicit. "Your father did leave money," I said quietly. "Quite a bit of money, actually." Mila's eyes widened. Daniel sat up straighter, a flash of triumph crossing his face. "How much are we talking?" he asked. "Enough," I said. "Enough that he was very careful about how it was structured. Enough that he knew it could either build someone up or destroy them, depending on their character." "Mama, what does that mean?" Mila's voice trembled slightly. I met her eyes. "It means your father created a trust, a very specific, very protected trust. The money is sealed, inaccessible, and will remain that way unless certain conditions are met." "What conditions?" Daniel demanded. "That's between Victor, his attorney, and me. That's not how estates work, Nora." Daniel's professional veneer was cracking, irritation bleeding through. "If Victor left money to Mila, she has a legal right to access it. He didn't leave it to Mila. He left it to me, with full discretionary control over if and when it passes to her." The silence that followed was arctic. "You're telling me," Daniel said slowly, each word sharp, "that there's family money, money that should be Mila's inheritance, and you're just sitting on it, controlling it?" "I'm protecting it, the way Victor asked me to." Mila's face had gone pale. "How much money are we talking about, Mom?" I hesitated, then decided they deserved at least partial truth. "Enough to change your life, enough to never worry about money again. But your father made very clear that you'd only receive it when you proved you were ready for that responsibility." "Ready?" Daniel's voice rose. "What does that even mean? Ready according to whose standards? Yours?" "Victor's standards. The standards of the man who earned that money and chose to protect it." "This is insane." Daniel stood abruptly, pacing. "You're holding Mila's inheritance hostage based on some arbitrary standard of readiness that you get to define? That's manipulation, Nora. That's financial abuse. It's protection, I said quietly. Protection from exactly this kind of entitlement. The word hung in the air. Mila finally spoke, her voice small. Mama, we're not being entitled. We're just trying to plan our future. Daniel and I have goals. We want to buy a house, start a family eventually. Knowing what resources might be available isn't unreasonable. You're right, I said. It's not unreasonable to plan your future. What's unreasonable is showing up at my home, telling me I'm alone and don't need much, and demanding access to money you haven't earned and might never receive. Daniel turned on me, his professional mask completely gone now. You know what I think? I think Victor left a modest amount, maybe $200,000-300,000, and you're exaggerating to maintain control over your daughter. I think this is about you being a lonely widow who can't accept that Mila has her own life now. I stood slowly, meeting his gaze. You're welcome to think whatever you'd like, Daniel. It doesn't change the facts. The money exists. It's substantial. And it's completely inaccessible to you. To us, Mila whispered. You mean it's inaccessible to us? The correction broke my heart. Yes, I said. To you. For now. Perhaps forever. That depends entirely on choices you make going forward. They left 20 minutes later, Daniel's jaw tight with barely contained fury, Mila crying quietly in the passenger seat. I watched the Mercedes disappear down the street and felt exhausted, hollow. I'd known this conversation was coming, had prepared for it during all those months of wedding planning and exclusion, but knowing and experiencing are different things. My phone rang 2 hours later. Harold Brennan, Victor's attorney. Mrs. Castellano, I thought you should know. I received a rather aggressive call from a Daniel Westbrook this afternoon, demanding information about your husband's estate. I told him I couldn't discuss client matters, but he was quite insistent, even threatened legal action. I'm not surprised, I said tiredly. There's something else. Harold's voice was grave. I did some discreet inquiring after his call. Daniel Westbrook has apparently been telling people, investors, business associates, that he has a guaranteed inheritance coming from his wife's family, substantial funds he's been using as collateral for business ventures. The room tilted. He's been borrowing money against an inheritance that doesn't exist? Against an inheritance he assumed existed. There are significant debts, Nora, leveraged investments, business partnerships based entirely on the promise of imminent family wealth. I sat down heavily. How much? Based on what I could learn? He's extended himself at least $500,000. $500,000 borrowed against money he'd never been promised, never had rights to, never even confirmed existed. Daniel Westbrook hadn't just married my daughter. He'd married what he thought was her fortune. And now, learning that fortune was out of reach, he'd already spent money he didn't have, building a life on foundations of sand. What happens when those debts come due? I asked quietly. That, Harold said, depends on whether Daniel tells the truth or doubles down on the lie. I hung up and sat in the darkening living room, Victor's warning echoing in my mind. Money can poison hearts if they're not ready. But what do you do when the poison has already spread? When your daughter has chosen someone who saw her not as a person, but as a path to wealth? When the life she's building is already collapsing and she doesn't even know it yet? I looked at the family photo on the mantel. Mila at 10 years old, gap-toothed and grinning, sandwiched between Victor and me at the beach. That girl wouldn't have demanded clarity about assets. That girl wouldn't have said her mother didn't need much. That girl was gone. And I was beginning to suspect she wasn't coming back. The first sign came 6 weeks after our confrontation, when Mila's cousin Jennifer called me. Aunt Nora, I don't know if this is my place, but I ran into Mila at the mall yesterday. She was returning a bunch of designer bags, arguing with the store manager about the return policy. She seemed really stressed. Is everything okay? I thanked Jennifer and said everything was fine, but my stomach knotted with dread. The second sign came when I drove past their townhouse, the luxury rental in Buckhead they'd moved into after the wedding, and saw a red notice taped to the door. Even from the street, I could read the word eviction in bold letters. I called Mila immediately. The phone rang 6 times before going to voicemail. "Sweetheart, I heard you might be having some difficulties. Please call me. Whatever's happening, we can talk about it." She didn't call back. The third sign came from Harold Brennan. "Mrs. Castellano, I thought you should know, Daniel Westbrook filed for bankruptcy last week. Personal and business. The filings are public record. It's extensive." I sat down at my kitchen table, the same table where Mila had once done her homework while I graded papers, and tried to process what Harold was telling me. How extensive? $470,000 in unsecured debt, credit cards, personal loans, business investments that went south. He'd been using lines of credit against the promise of your family inheritance. When those investors realized the money wasn't coming, they called in the debts. Everything collapsed. "And Mila?" Harold hesitated. "Her name is on several of the accounts. She's liable for at least half the debt. My daughter, my 26-year-old daughter who'd been working in marketing for less than 3 years, was suddenly responsible for $250,000 in debt she hadn't even known they were accumulating." Over the following weeks, I watched from a distance as their life imploded. The luxury townhouse was surrendered. They moved into a modest apartment in a less fashionable neighborhood. The Mercedes was repossessed. Mila's social media, once filled with perfectly curated photos of restaurant meals and weekend trips, went silent. I heard through the family grapevine that Daniel had lost his job at his family's firm. Patricia Westbrook, it turned out, had very little tolerance for sons who embarrassed the family name with bankruptcy filings. Friends started calling me with gossip they'd heard. Arguments at dinner parties, Daniel blaming Mila for not securing the family money, Mila crying in restaurant bathrooms. Their marriage, built on a foundation of anticipated wealth, was crumbling under the weight of actual reality. I wanted to help. Despite everything, despite the pain and the exclusion and the "you don't need much" comment, she was still my daughter. But every time I reached out, my calls went unanswered, until the night she finally called back. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday. I was already in bed reading when my phone lit up with her name. "Hello?" I answered, my heart racing. "How could you?" Her voice was raw, furious, broken. "How could you do this to me?" I sat up, turning on the lamp. "Mila, what?" "You knew. You knew about Daddy's money. And you just sat there and watched me struggle. Watched Daniel and me plan our life, make decisions, build our future. And you knew we were doing it based on money that was never coming." "You planned your life based on money you'd never been promised," I said quietly. "Money you didn't even know existed until 3 months ago." "That's bullshit, and you know it." She was crying now, her words coming in gasps. "Everyone knows widows get life insurance. Everyone knows Daddy came from money. We weren't being unreasonable. We were being rational. And you let us think we'd be okay." "You should be okay. You both have jobs, educations, abilities. We're drowning, Mom. We're drowning in debt because Daniel made investments based on that inheritance. Do you understand? He borrowed against it. He told people it was coming. And now those people want their money back, and we have nothing." The anguish in her voice cut through me, but I held firm. "Daniel borrowed against money that wasn't his. That was his choice, his risk, his responsibility." "You could fix this!" she screamed. "You could fix all of this right now. You have the money. You admitted it. You could pay off the debt, help us get back on our feet, save my marriage." "Save your marriage?" I repeated slowly. "Mila, if your marriage requires $10 million to survive, it was never a marriage worth saving." The silence that followed was devastating. When she spoke again, her voice was cold. "You've ruined my future. You've ruined my life. Daddy would be ashamed of you." The invocation of Victor, using him as a weapon, made something harden in my chest. "Your father is the one who created this trust. Your father is the one who insisted the money be protected until you proved you were ready. Your father is the one who warned me that money can poison hearts. Everything I've done because Victor asked me to. Liar. The word was venom. Daddy would never do this to me. He loved me. This is you, your control, your bitterness, your jealousy that I have a husband and you don't. Each accusation landed like a physical blow. I'm sorry you're in pain, I said, my voice shaking. I'm sorry your husband made terrible financial decisions. I'm sorry your marriage is struggling, but I will not reward greed. I will not enable entitlement, and I will not betray your father's wishes because you're angry. Then I guess we're done. Her voice was flat now, empty. Don't call me. Don't come to my home. Don't pretend you care. You made your choice. She hung up. I sat in my bed, phone still in my hand, and cried. Not quiet tears, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place of profound loss. My daughter had just disowned me over money she'd never earned, never been promised, never deserved. And somewhere in the midst of that grief, I felt something else, clarity. Victor had been right. The money would have destroyed her. If she'd received it at 19 or 23, or even now at 26, it would have simply enabled the worst parts of her character. The entitlement, the materialism, the belief that wealth equals worth. Daniel had destroyed himself with debt chasing an inheritance that didn't exist. But if the inheritance had existed, if I'd simply handed it over when Mila turned 21, she would have given it all to Daniel, would have let him spend it, leverage it, lose it in failed schemes and bad investments. She would have ended up in exactly the same place, just with 10 million fewer dollars to show for it. Victor had seen this possibility years before it manifested, had looked at our 19-year-old daughter and recognized that grief, immaturity, and sudden wealth would be a catastrophic combination. He'd protected her from herself, and now I was protecting what remained, both the money and the possibility, however small, that she might someday become the person who deserved it. The next morning, I called Harold. I want to add a condition to the trust, I said. If Mila ever proves she's changed, genuinely changed, not performing change to access the money, she can have the inheritance. But if I die before that happens, I want the funds to be held in trust for another 10 years. During that time, she'll receive a modest stipend for living expenses, but nothing more. If she demonstrates sustained character growth during those 10 years, the full amount becomes accessible. If not, it goes to charity. That's a significant change, Harold said carefully. Are you certain? I thought about Mila's words the night before. You've ruined my future. I'm certain, I said. Because if my daughter believes her future depends on inherited wealth rather than her own character and effort, then her future was already ruined. I'm just refusing to enable it. Harold made the changes. That afternoon, I sat in Victor's study, surrounded by his books and his memory, and felt a strange sense of peace. I'd lost my daughter. Or rather, I'd lost the fantasy of who I'd hoped she'd become. That grief was real and deep and would probably never fully heal. But I'd kept my promise to Victor. I'd protected the fortune. I'd refused to let money poison what remained of Mila's chance at redemption. Whether she ever took that chance was up to her. I'd done everything a mother could do. Sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes protection looks like withholding. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is refusing to save them from the consequences of their own choices. Victor had understood that. And finally, after 7 years of widowhood, watching my daughter transform into a stranger, I understood it too. The money sat in its trust, protected and waiting. My door remained open. If Mila ever chose to walk through it with genuine humility rather than entitled demands. But I would not compromise, would not negotiate, would not betray Victor's wisdom just to ease my own loneliness. I'd made my choice, and I'd made the right one. I didn't hear from Mila for 8 months after that devastating phone call. 8 months of silence so complete, it felt like death. I'd drive past places we used to go together, the coffee shop where we'd met for Sunday brunches, the bookstore where I'd buy her novels for Christmas, the park where Victor used to push her on the swings, and feel the absence like a physical ache. I heard about her through others, always through others. Her cousin Jennifer mentioned that Mila had moved out of the apartment she'd shared with Daniel, crashing on a friend's couch. Margaret, my sister, reported seeing Mila at the grocery store looking thin and tired, her cart filled with ramen and store-brand cereal. A former colleague told me Mila had been let go from her marketing job. Restructuring, they called it, but we both knew what that meant when someone's personal life was imploding publicly. The bankruptcy had been covered in the business section of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Not prominently, but enough that anyone who knew the Westbrook name would have seen it. The social humiliation alone must have been crushing for someone who'd spent years chasing status and sophistication. I wanted to reach out. Every day, I wanted to call, to show up at wherever she was staying, to fix things the way mothers are supposed to fix things. But Victor's voice echoed in my mind. She must choose who she becomes. We can't choose for her. So I waited, and tried not to let the waiting break me. The call came on a Tuesday evening in late March. I was washing dishes, the kitchen window open to let in the first warm breeze of spring, when my phone rang. Mila's name on the screen. My hands were still wet when I answered. Hello? Silence. Then a sound I recognized instantly, the hitching breath of someone trying not to cry. Mila, sweetheart, are you there? I'm sorry. Her voice was small, shattered. I'm so sorry, Mom. I sank into the kitchen chair, gripping the phone. What happened? Are you hurt? Are you safe? She broke off, sobbing. Not the angry, accusatory crying from our last conversation. This was different, deeper, the sound of something fundamental breaking apart. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know who I am anymore. Where are you? At a motel off Highway 85. Daniel filed for divorce last week. I can't afford a real apartment. I'm barely affording this place. My credit cards are maxed out. Debt collectors call me 10 times a day, and her voice cracked. I just wanted to hear your voice. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for anything. I needed my mom. I needed my mom. The words undid me. Give me the address, I said, already reaching for my keys. I'm coming. You don't have to. Give me the address, Mila. She did. I drove the 23 minutes to the motel in a daze, my heart pounding, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. The motel was exactly as depressing as I'd imagined, a 2-story strip off the highway with flickering neon and security bars on the windows. Mila opened the door before I could knock. She looked like a ghost of herself. Her hair, always so carefully styled, hung limp around her face. She'd lost weight, too much weight. Her clothes were rumpled, her eyes swollen from crying, but it was her expression that broke my heart, defeated, lost, achingly young. Hi, Mama, she whispered. I pulled her into my arms, and she collapsed against me, sobbing the way she had when Victor died, like everything safe and certain had been stripped away. I held her and let her cry. Eventually, we sat on the edge of the motel bed, the only furniture besides a small table and chair, and she told me everything. Daniel had blamed her for the inheritance falling through, had accused her of lying to him about her family's wealth. The divorce filing had been vindictive, calculated to leave her with maximum debt and minimum assets. She'd lost her job after missing too much work, dealing with legal appointments and debt consolidation meetings. Friends had distanced themselves. Turns out they were Daniel's friends, not mine, she said bitterly. I keep thinking about everything I gave up, she said, staring at her hands. You mostly. I pushed you away for years because Daniel and his family made me feel like you weren't enough, like our life wasn't enough, like I needed to be someone different, someone better. Someone classier, I said quietly, remembering her words to the bridesmaid. She flinched. You heard that? I did. I don't know why I said it. I don't know why I thought that way. You're my mom. You're the person who held me when Daddy died, who drove me to therapy, who loved me even when I was... She trailed off, fresh tears sliding down her face. Even when I was awful to you. You were lost, I said carefully. Grief can do that. Loss can do that. It wasn't just grief, though, was it? She looked at me with painful clarity. I was entitled. I measured people by what they could give me. I treated you like you were only valuable if you could contribute to the life I wanted. I became exactly the kind of person Daddy would have been ashamed of. The mention of Victor settled between us. Your father loved you, I said. Always. But he worried about exactly what happened. He worried that money, or the pursuit of it, would change you. The money, Mila said slowly. From the trust, the one you told me about. Yes. How much is there, really? I hesitated, then decided she deserved honesty. $10 million. Your father built it from his family inheritance. He wanted you to have it, but only when you were ready. She absorbed this, nodding slowly. And I wasn't ready. No. Am I ready now? The question hung in the air between us. She wasn't asking for the money, wasn't demanding or manipulating. She was genuinely asking whether she'd changed enough to deserve what her father had left behind. I don't know, I said honestly. Readiness isn't about hitting rock bottom. It's about what you build after. It's about choosing character over comfort, people over possessions, integrity over image. It's a long process, Mila, and it has to be genuine. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I understand. We sat in silence for a long moment. Then she spoke again, her voice tentative. Could I come home, just for a little while, until I figure things out? I'll get a job, contribute to expenses. I won't be a burden. I just can't afford this place much longer, and I don't have anywhere else to go. My instinct was to say yes immediately, to bring my daughter home, feed her, hold her, protect her from the consequences of her choices. But Victor's voice whispered, protection sometimes means letting them struggle. You can come home, I said carefully, but with conditions. You'll pay rent, not much, but something. You'll get a job, any job, within 2 weeks. You'll attend therapy, and you'll live there as my daughter, not as an heir waiting for an inheritance. The money exists, but it's not a safety net you can plan around. Do you understand? Yes. She grabbed my hand. Yes, I understand. Thank you, Mama. Thank you. We left the motel that night. I paid for the room through the end of the week so she could collect her things, and she followed me home in her aging Honda, the car she'd had in college, the one she'd been embarrassed by when Daniel came into her life. As I pulled into the driveway of the house where she'd grown up, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Cautious hope. That night, after Mila had gone to sleep in her childhood bedroom, I sat at Victor's desk and wrote her a letter. Not one to give her immediately, but one to keep, to explain everything when the time was right. Dearest Mila, your father left you $10 million not because he wanted to control you, but because he wanted to protect you. He saw in you, in all of us, the potential to be either destroyed or elevated by wealth. The money has always been yours, but the version of you who could handle it safely, wisely, lovingly, that version had to be chosen, had to be earned. Not through suffering, but through growth. I don't know if you're ready yet. Only time will tell. But for the first time in 7 years, I see glimpses of the girl your father and I raised. The girl who valued kindness over status, who measured worth by character, not bank accounts. That girl can have the inheritance whenever she's ready. The question is, do you want to become her again? All my love, Mom. I sealed the letter and placed it in Victor's desk drawer next to the trust documents. Someday, maybe months from now, maybe years, I'd give it to her. But for now, we had something more important to rebuild, not a fortune, a relationship, and perhaps, if we were very lucky, the daughter Victor had always believed she could become. Mila had been living with me for 6 weeks when I made the appointment with Harold Brennan. 6 weeks of small, careful steps towards something that resembled normalcy. She'd found a job at a local nonprofit, administrative work, nothing glamorous, but honest. She paid rent on the first of each month, exactly as we'd agreed. She started therapy with Dr. Chen, a kind woman who specialized in grief and identity reconstruction. We moved around each other carefully at first, like strangers learning to share space. But gradually, small rituals emerged. Coffee together in the morning, dinner at the kitchen table instead of in separate rooms, a hesitant hug before bed. She never asked about the money, never mentioned the trust. Never even hinted at the $10 million she knew existed somewhere, protected and waiting. That restraint, that deliberate choice not to ask, told me more about her transformation than any words could have. Still, I knew I needed to make the conditions explicit, not just for Mila's sake, but for my own peace of mind. Harold's office looked exactly as it had 7 years ago when I'd first learned about Victor's trust. Same leather chairs, same wall of legal volumes, same sense of permanence and careful deliberation. "Mrs. Castellano." Harold stood to greet me, his handshake warm. "It's good to see you. Your call suggested this wasn't purely social." "I need to update the trust conditions," I said, settling into the chair across from his desk. "I add more specific requirements before any funds can be released to Mila." Harold pulled out the file, thicker now than it had been, amended multiple times over the years as circumstances changed. "What did you have in mind?" "Sustained change," I said. "Not a moment of crisis or a temporary reformation. I want to require proof of genuine, consistent character growth over at least 2 to 3 years before any portion of the inheritance becomes accessible." Harold made notes, his pen moving steadily across the legal pad. "What would constitute proof?" I'd thought about this carefully during the drive to his office. Employment stability, financial responsibility, not wealth, but living within her means, paying debts, making sound decisions, ongoing therapy, maintained relationships built on authenticity rather than transaction. And, I paused, choosing my words carefully, demonstrated empathy. Evidence that she values people for who they are, not what they can provide. "Those are subjective measures," Harold said gently. "How would we verify them?" "You wouldn't. I would." I met his eyes. "The trust gives me full discretionary control. I'm simply formalizing what Victor intended. The money is Mila's when she proves, to me, to herself, to the memory of her father, that she's become the woman we raised her to be." Harold nodded slowly. "And if that day never comes?" "Then the inheritance goes to charity, educational scholarships for underprivileged students, something that would honor Victor's belief in building character, not just wealth. You understand this could mean Mila receives nothing? Even after years of genuine effort?" "I understand." My voice was steady. "But Victor trusted me to make this judgment. And I trust that if Mila truly changes, if she becomes the person who deserves this inheritance, I'll recognize it." Harold drafted the amendments. I signed them in triplicate, watched him file them in the thick folder labeled Castellano Trust, Private and Confidential. "One more thing," I said, as I prepared to leave. "If something happens to me before Mila receives the inheritance, I want the funds held in trust for an additional 10 years. During that time, she should receive only a modest living stipend. If she demonstrates sustained character growth throughout that decade, the full amount becomes accessible. If not, it goes to the charities we've designated." "You're protecting her even from beyond the grave," Harold observed. "I'm protecting the fortune," I corrected, "and hoping that protecting it long enough will give her time to become someone who doesn't need protection from it." I drove home through the spring afternoon, watching the dogwoods bloom along the roadside, thinking about Victor and the impossible wisdom he'd shown in his final days. He'd seen something in our daughter that I'd been too close to recognize. Not malice, not cruelty, but vulnerability to the very things that destroy so many people, the lure of status, the seduction of easy wealth, the belief that worth comes from external validation rather than internal character. He'd loved her enough to protect her from herself, and now I was doing the same. When I arrived home, Mila's car was in the driveway. I found her in the kitchen, wearing one of my old aprons, stirring something on the stove. "Hi, Mama." She looked up, smiling tentatively. "I hope you don't mind. I got off work early and thought I'd make dinner. It's nothing fancy, just pasta with that sauce Daddy used to make. I found his recipe card in the drawer." Victor's pasta sauce. The one he'd perfected over years of Sunday dinners. The one that had filled this kitchen with warmth and garlic and laughter. "I don't mind at all," I said, my throat tight with emotion. We set the table together, not the formal dining room table we'd used for holidays, but the kitchen table where we'd shared thousands of ordinary meals. Mila had even found the good napkins, the ones with embroidered edges that Victor's mother had given us as a wedding gift. As we ate, Mila talked about her day at the nonprofit, a difficult client who'd finally opened up, a grant proposal she was helping write. Small triumphs that wouldn't impress anyone at a cocktail party, but meant something real. "I've been thinking," she said, twirling pasta on her fork, "about the person I became after Daddy died." I waited, letting her find her words. I was so angry at the world for taking him, and somewhere in that anger, I decided that if I couldn't have him, I'd have everything else. Status, wealth, the perfect life that would prove I was okay, that I'd survived, that losing him hadn't destroyed me. She set down her fork. But it did destroy me, just not in the way I expected. It destroyed the parts of me that mattered, the parts Daddy would have recognized. "You were 19 years old and grieving," I said gently. "People make mistakes when they're in pain. I made more than mistakes, Mama. I chose cruelty over kindness. I chose ambition over integrity. I chose Daniel because of what he represented, not who he was. And I chose to push you away because—" She paused, tears gathering. "Because you reminded me of everything I was abandoning, every value Daddy taught me, every principle you'd raised me with. It was easier to make you the problem than to face what I was becoming. Why are you telling me this now? Because I need you to know I'm not apologizing to get something from you. I'm apologizing because you deserve an apology, because I treated you terribly, because even if there was no trust, no inheritance, no money at all, I'd still owe you this." The words settled between us, genuine and unadorned. "I forgive you," I said simply. "I forgave you a long time ago. I was just waiting for you to come back." She reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm not all the way back yet. I'm still figuring out who I am without Daniel, without the life I thought I wanted. But I'm trying. I promise I'm trying." "That's all anyone can do," I said. We finished dinner talking about small things. Books we were reading. A movie she wanted to see. Plans to plant tomatoes in the garden when the weather warmed. Normal conversation. Mother and daughter, rebuilding what had been broken. After Mila went to bed, I stood in Victor's study, looking at the photograph on his desk. The three of us at the beach when Mila was 10, her gap-toothed grin capturing a moment of perfect, uncomplicated joy. I opened the desk drawer and pulled out the trust folder. Thick with amendments and conditions and protective clauses. $10 million, waiting. I thought about the daughter sleeping upstairs in her childhood bedroom, the one who was working at a nonprofit for modest pay, who was paying rent and going to therapy and making her father's pasta sauce, who was choosing, day by day, to become someone different than the woman who'd excluded me from her wedding. Was she ready for the inheritance? No. Not yet. Would she ever be? I didn't know. But for the first time in 7 years, I had hope. Victor had believed she could grow into the woman who deserved his legacy. He'd trusted me to recognize when that transformation was complete. I touched the sealed folder, feeling the weight of responsibility, love, and impossible hope contained within it. "When she is ready," I whispered to Victor's photograph, to his memory, to the promise I'd made him 7 years ago, "the fortune will be waiting." I returned the folder to the drawer and turned off the light. Upstairs, my daughter slept in the home where she'd been raised, where she was learning, slowly and painfully, to become herself again. The money could wait. We had something more important to build first, a relationship based on love, not leverage, a future built on character, not capital, a chance, fragile and uncertain, but real, for both of us to heal. And maybe, if we were very fortunate, a day would come when Mila could receive her father's legacy not as an entitled daughter, but as a woman who'd earned it through the hardest work of all, choosing to become someone worthy of it. The fortune would wait. It had waited 7 years already. It could wait as long as it took, because some inheritances aren't about money at all. They're about becoming the person someone believed you could be. And that transformation can't be rushed, can't be bought, and can't be given. It can only be chosen. One difficult, humble, genuine day at a time.